Hello, friends. So, today is one of those days where I go a little bit off piste and talk about something a little bit other than models and rules. We could almost imagine this as a Retro Hammer episode, and certainly in my mind, it occupies the same sort of thought space because I first got into Warhammer 40,000 back in the tail end of 1988. So at the young age of 13, if my memory serves me correctly. And yes, so a long time ago, shortly after first edition Rogue Trader was released, one of the things with growing up with and coming into Warhammer 40,000 at that stage was, I suppose, like the cultural scene that I had grown up in as a child and how Warhammer 40,000 fit within that. So I'm from England in the United Kingdom. Warhammer 40,000 originated in the UK, so it came out of the city of Nottingham. I suppose in my early years, one of the things I remember that really I felt connected to Warhammer 40,000 when I first picked up that Rogue Trader book and read it were the comic strips of 2000 AD. So the likes of Judge Dredd, Bad Company, the ABC Warriors, Nemesis the Warlock, and of course, we can't forget Rogue Trooper, can we? And for me as an early teenager, Warhammer 40,000 very much spoke to kind of like the themes of those comic books of that era. And there was historical reference, there was a lot of irony, and there was a lot of dystopian settings that the stories were, through the use of satire, warning people against, in effect. I think we could take Rogue Trooper as perhaps one of the best examples of this, of someone who was a hero, as near to a hero as you might get in Rogue Trooper, a hero in a dystopian setting. So that was very much my perception of 40k when I picked it up. And it's very, very clear on the first edition Warhammer 40,000 Rogue Trader book. If you read the back jacket, it's absolutely clear that the Imperium of Man is a terrible place. The Emperor is not a nice thing, as he's referred to, the corpse Emperor of the Imperium, and the universe is full of dangerous and dark gods. So that was how I grew into Warhammer 40,000 and how I've always viewed the setting on a fictional level in terms of the themes. The Imperium of Man is a highly dystopian future society. It's terrifying. It's more terrifying than anything in Dune even, I think. And that's always stayed with me. And whenever I read stories, read rules, anything like that, that's always kind of like how I'm looking at it. And same when you're reading the stories. So it was interesting today to see an article appear on the Warhammer Community website, so Warhammer marketing, let's be honest. But this was interesting, and the article is dated the 19th of November 2021, and it is titled, "The Imperium is Driven by Hate. Warhammer is Not." And I thought, hello a second, this is interesting. So let's put it on screen. And let me just cover a few of these points. It starts by saying there are no goodies in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. None. Especially not the Imperium of Man. So I'd read the first three sentences and I thought, oh yeah, this article makes a lot of sense to me. Its numberless legions of soldiers and zealots bludgeon their way across the galaxy, delivering death to anyone and anything that doesn't adhere to their blinkered view of purity. Almost every man and woman toils in misery either on the battlefield, where survival is measured in hours, or in the countless manufactorums and hive slums that fuel the imperial war machine. All of this in slavish servitude to the living corpse of a god emperor whose commandments are at best only half remembered, twisted by time and the fallibility of humanity. Warhammer 40,000 isn't just grimdark, it's a grimmest darkest. Well, they're blowing their own trumpet at this point, aren't they? But like I said to begin with, it's always felt a very dystopian setting to me. And even more so than, say, a novel like 1984, George Orwell's masterpiece. The Imperium of Man stands as a cautionary tale of what could happen should the very worst of humanity's lust for power and extreme, unyielding xenophobia set in. Like so many aspects of Warhammer 40,000, the Imperium of Man is satirical. Absolutely, I agree. So yes, this is really speaking to me, 1988 brain me, the time when 40k first came out and the setting it was written in and the meaning of the universe. For clarity, satire is the use of humour, irony, or exaggeration displaying people's vices or a system's flaw for scorn, derision, and ridicule. You can use satire in other ways, but that's not inaccurate. Something doesn't have to be wacky or laugh out loud funny to be satire. Absolutely. The best satire is the subtlest. The derision is in the setting's amplification of a tyrannical, genocidal regime turned up to 11. Presumably, this is on a 1 to 10 scale. The Imperium is not an aspirational state outside of the in-universe perspectives of those who are slaves to its systems. So you can argue, I suppose, I could see what I was saying there. I mean, I guess being an orc is better than a Gretchen. I suppose becoming a space marine could be preferable to life in the Underhive scum. But it's relative. It is a monstrous civilization, and its monstrousness is plain for all to see. Yes, and a great way to visualize the latent horror of the Imperium is the idea of servitors and how people can be turned into them. If you don't understand the concept behind a servitor and how terrifying it is, I strongly suggest you read the novel Rin's World, which deals with the Crimson Fist's famous battle. But it's in the first part of that book, and it's very important because it deals with this question of servitors from a very stark example. And when you read it and you think about the decisions that are made and the way those are done, it is absolutely terrifying thing to behold. So yes, Rin's World. As a matter of fact, I think everyone should read Rin's World. It's a very thoughtful novel in the Warhammer 40,000 universe in terms of exposing some of the many terrors and horrors that it holds. That said, certain real-world hate groups and adherents of historical ideologies, far better left in the past, sometimes seek to claim intellectual properties for their own enjoyment and to co-opt them for their own agendas. So, yes, we all know who the sort of ideology and groups, belief systems, whatever you want to call them, that is being referred to here. And what is being described is a real thing. You don't need an article here to describe how co-opting is a strategy of extremist groups to extend their reach. It's a well-known thing, and if you read into anything like that, and particularly how you deal with extremists in modern society, it is one of the things that has to be worked against. So a bit more then. We've said it before, but a reminder about what we believe in. So, flashback here to June 2020 and the Warhammer is for everyone statement, which I covered on my channel some time ago now. We believe in and support a community united by shared values of mutual kindness and respect. Our fantasy settings are grim and dark, but that is not a reflection of who we are or how we feel the real world should be. We will never accept nor condone any form of prejudice, hatred, or abuse in our company or in the Warhammer hobby. So, I don't disagree with that. I'm reassured to hear that Games Workshop thinks this is a standard they should hold and people participating in their hobby should hold. So, I think that's a good thing to say. And then the article continues to say, if you come to a Games Workshop event or store and behave to the contrary, including wearing the symbols of real-world hate groups, you will be asked to leave. We won't let you participate. We don't want your money. We don't want you in the Warhammer community. So I think this is a very stark statement. Most of it is in bold text, and it's very unequivocal, and I think it's a good thing. There's a reason this article got written. We could call it a proximate cause, but I suppose the scope has been expanded to cover other issues. But the proximate cause was related to a gaming tournament, which I think was a 40k one, or certainly Warhammer themed, that took place in Spain not too long ago. I don't know the details, but there was an individual who attended this event, and they were wearing a piece of clothing that had a number of symbols which are of an extremist ideology, and the sort of ideology which is not about including people into a hobby but excluding them, and not because of what they do, their behavior, but because of just their innate traits as people, things that people should never be discriminated against for or marginalised for. So that's the proximate cause of this article. For those heroes out there running their own Warhammer events, we'd love for you to join us in this stance. Over the years, we've been fortunate enough to support events like Adepticon, Las Vegas Open, Blood and Glory, and many, many more with terrain, prizes, and goodie bags. We've also provided staff to help with organisation and rules queries, and to judge painting competitions and run seminars. If you need help running an event, including creating a safe and rewarding experience for your attendees, we're here to help you. Just drop our events team an email address given. We'd love to hear from you, and we're ready to offer any support we can. So that's good, that. Very unequivocal, clear language is being used here. There's no humour in this article, as we often see from a Warhammer Community publication. This is very straight language, it's plain talking, and there's no ambiguity at all. And, I think it's a great thing to hear Games Workshop make a public statement like this. We could say, well, what a sad state of the world to hear them say this. But at the same time, you can't ignore reality. And reality is there, and the question is, how do you confront that reality in your day-to-day lives? And then the article goes on to say some more things about what they're doing. So the corporate communicator in me, I got to give credit to the person who wrote the article, because they've combined the message with also an outreach message. Well, the message about, in effect, what is a code of conduct, they've combined that with an outreach message. So a good bit of marketing there as well. But this isn't usual GW marketing. This is something different. So what do I think about this? Well, there are a number of things that I think about it. Firstly, I like that it is a proactive step. So this statement's being made because of an event that happened that GW wasn't officially associated with. However, they have become aware of it and they've considered it. They've chosen to act rather than ignore it. And they've chosen to act in, a pretty clear and unequivocal manner. So I think that's a good thing, and I'm glad they've done it. It's better to be on the front foot than to wait for an incident to happen and then be accused of turning a blind eye. I think the statement is clear. I think they could do more, and the obvious step to go beyond what they've said here, perhaps they do have this information that may be available on request, but what this reads to me as is a code of conduct for their stores and events. Codes of conduct are very common. If you ever pay to enter a venue, and sometimes even don't pay to enter a venue, you will be implicitly accepting that venue's code of conduct. So what Games Workshop here is, they are just making a statement, in effect, about what would constitute part of that code of conduct, and they're stating it very clearly. But perhaps if we actually had a code of conduct that we said, this is a code of conduct for behaviour at Games Workshop stores, this is a standard that is expected, and this is a standard that is expected at our events, and this is a standard that is expected at events we support, I think that would be stronger still. I'm a senior manager in a very large international company. I don't want to sound like I'm doing what would be called an appeal to authority here. Safe to say, I have practical, real-world experience of being trained in what we'll call codes of conduct. I've experience of upholding them and promoting them in the workplace amongst my colleagues and people I work with, people who work for me directly, and also people I work with, because I work with a lot of people from a lot of different locations. So I've got some good real-world practical experience of this in action. And what they're talking about here is no different to what you would have in any sort of well set out code of conduct in an employment contract. So if Games Workshop took this statement and turned it into a proper code of conduct that was then expected of a certain group of events, that would make it even stronger. I also think it's one of the first serious signs I've seen from Games Workshop where they are trying to confront what is probably a somewhat difficult legacy of their product. And what I'm about to talk about now is, if I were to characterize it, I'd say, well, this is a thing that keeps Games Workshop's product development manager awake at night. And by that, what I mean is GW started off with 40k and they wrote it. It was a very different business and a very different setting to what they've become. They were a small-sized business in a very niche market. Today, they are a large business. They're worth a lot of money. They have valuable stock. Things like pension funds will have money in Games Workshop. It's a big business. And in some ways, if I think of all the products I buy, it's quite a difficult position, you could say, to be a company who they're both big corporate, but their most popular product, i.e. Warhammer 40,000, is based around a satirical universe, or a universe that satirizes tyranny and oppression. And Games Workshop's also got to kind of confront perhaps how they let the satire slip in the 90s and noughties and went maybe a bit too far with making Space Marines look too cool and then times heroic, and focusing on that too much and forgetting about the dystopian element of the setting that is kind of the all-important thing. Heroic Space Marines is a very selective view of what the Imperium is as a whole. And that is a difficult circle to square, but Games Workshop, I think, has dropped the ball with that. As I said, in the mid to late 90s and the noughties in particular. And it's something that they, and maybe even of recent times as well, and I think they need to kind of get a handle on that again. And what they've written here gives me some hope that they will do that. Yeah. So there you go. There's a few thoughts around this article, because it is an unusual article to see Games Workshop put out, and I think the message is important. And perhaps if you haven't sort of seen that side of Warhammer 40,000 universe, it's an important and interesting and rewarding in terms of making yourself think about things. It's a very rewarding side of the genre to get into. As I said, so there's some great books you could read. Rindsworld, I'll put the author's name on screen now. That's an excellent book. Very good for looking at how Space Marines interact with humans. And as I said, there's a very stark example in there that shows you the terror of what a servitor is and being in a universe where they can be made from humans, real people. That's a good one. The Horus Rising novel by Dan Abnett is another really important novel in understanding the context of the Imperium. Slightly different time angle, so it's set at the time of what was called the Great Crusade. But that's another really important and insightful novel to read to get a feeling for the satirical element of a Warhammer 40,000, but also understanding the morality of the story as well. I would highly recommend that. Both of these stories as well, Rindsworld, Horus Rising, they're very well written. They're great stories in themselves. There's just a couple of ideas. Also the original trilogy, we could call it, of Warhammer 40,000 hardbacks. So these are a bit hard to get hold of these days, but Warhammer 40,000 Rogue Trader, Realm of Chaos, Slaves to Darkness, and Realm of Chaos, The Lost and the Damned. Obviously, the first book is all about 40k. The other two have sections on 40k. But there's some very important universe building there. And if you are able to find a copy to read, whatever source that may be, you can take yourself back to the late 80s and recontextualize yourself as to where you are. And also, if you can find old copies of 2000 AD, some of them have been reprinted. That can help you understand as well, if you've not seen it before. So anyway, that's turned into like a 20-minute plus ramble. I hope I haven't bored you there. This is actually supposed to be like a 5 or 6 minute video. We go where our thoughts lead us. So I hope you found this an interesting and thought-provoking video. It might be a bit off topic, but it's still on piece, I like to think. As always, if you've got any comments or observations, please politely share those in the comment section. I'll be very interested to read as always. But other than that, I'd just like to say thank you very much for watching. I'll speak to you next time, and goodbye.